Good evening, everyone. I'm Tanzim Wahab, curator and community facilitator of Spore. I'm, and I'm here today to introduce our next guest of this evening. Our next speaker is one of the most powerful voices in our time. With her poignant and uncompromising words, constantly inspiring us for change and empowering ecologically responsible practice, but also collective actions. Dr. Vandana Shiva. Dr. Shiva has many identities and roles. An environmental thinker, a food sovereignty activist, a physicist, a science policy and seed freedom advocate, a writer and author of more than 20 books and over 300 journals, including the book Soil Not Oil, Staying Alive, Who Really Feeds the World, Biopiracy, Oneness versus 1%, and I'm sure you'll talk about it today. Monoculture of minds, and where she's also reminding us the importance of changing our minds before we change the world. Dr. Shiva also reminds us the importance of acknowledging the self-determination of nature, how art has created the condition of life to evolve, and how soil could be seen as a metaphor for the world of today. Dr. Shiva was the recipient of Right Livelihood Award in 1993, known as the Alternative Nobel Prize. She was also recipient of Order of Golden Ark, Global 500 Award from the UN, Sydney Peace Prize, to name a few. She is the co-founder of Navdanya, 9 Seeds, a movement and platform for promoting and protecting diversity and use of the native seeds, organic farming, fair trade, sustainability, most importantly, and the integrity of living resources and the interwoven relationship between nature and ecofeminist actions led by women. With her various initiatives, she's sharing a dream and also a possibility of an alternative globalization, constantly engaging the communities in dialogue and various forms of collaborations to think about a collective solution together, where we at Spore find our solidarity with you. Dr. Shiva, it's a deep pleasure and an immense honor to have you with us, and also now we welcome you to the podium. Shagatom, Dr. Vandana Shiva.
Thank you, Hans, and the Spore team for making this very special Earth Day celebration for all of us. And thank you so much for Antonio Alempi for, for bringing this rich culture. While he was doing this, I was thinking, that was my high school project on feedback. If we were in India, there'd be a ceremony like this for peace with the earth. May the peace of the skies, may the peace of space, may the peace of water, may the peace of the plants, may the peace of the 4 directions, may that peace be with you. And at one level, all our particular local traditions have such an amazing shared commonality about oneness with the earth and aliveness of Mother Earth. I began my life in physics and quantum theory. But along the way, I was compelled, really, ethically, ecologically, to look at agriculture, because I've watched the harm being done. Particularly 1984, the place where I had done my MSc honors in particle physics, most prosperous part of India, erupted in violence, 15,000 people dead. Same year, 2nd December, thousands died when a pesticide plant leaked. And I had a basic question. Where did the chemicals come from? And what is the context of this violence? And I wrote a book at that time, The Violence of the Green Revolution. And I get called to a meeting by the no, they didn't call the meeting. They called the chemical industry, the UN, and some of us to talk about the emerging biotechnologies, the new genetic engineering. At that time, there was no GMO. In 1987, there was no GMO in the world. But the plan for GMOs was being laid out. Even though in 1972, the scientists who had done the work on the recombinant DNA had put a moratorium on their own work. They said, we know how to do it, we know how to move genes across species, but we don't know what it means ethically for our species, nor do we know what it means ecologically for the planet. But once the tools were out, of course, there were people who could find ways to make money, and at this meeting in 87, the three things that were said that then made me a seed saver for the rest of my life. First, it was said that genetic engineering would be the only way seeds would be made because they allow the corporations to take a patent. A patent is granted for an invention. And in my view, seed is not invented by humanity. We can modify it, we can modulate it, we can put a Roundup-ready gene into it, but the Roundup-ready gene doesn't make the next generation of seed. The seed makes itself. It's autopoietic. And then they said it's not good enough to pass these laws for Europe and the United States because most of the peasants are in the third world. The peasants of Mexico, who have given us hundreds of thousands of varieties of corn. Peasants of India, who've given us 200,000 varieties of rice from one grass. Just think of the brilliance of breeding. One grass into rices that are aromatic, rices that are black and brown and purple and black, every color under the sun. Rices that when we started saving seeds, we didn't know we'd be saving seeds of resilience for climate change. So they said we need an international law, which became the Intellectual Property Rights Agreement of WTO. And the reason it's called TRIPS, which sounds like tripping over life, is because my country, and I worked with our ambassadors at that time, said, but intellectual property is a national democratic subject. It's not part of trade. And they said, okay, we'll just put TR before IP. It's trade related by definition. And the third thing they said is, it is unfair that farmers save seeds. And I remember in my books, I've cited, a Monsanto representative said in 1995, when the WTO came into being, that we've achieved something unprecedented. We defined a problem, and the problem they defined was farmers save seeds. And we offered a solution, and the solution was now onwards, it would be a crime to save seeds. And they said we were the patient. They were sick because farmers protect biodiversity. That was the illness. And they were the diagnosticians. And then they were the physicians saying ban saving seed. And as an ecologist, from the 70s, I'd been protecting biodiversity in nature. And it was outrageous at every level. It was ethically outrageous to claim to have invented life. I call GMOs God move over. Our turn now. And it was ecologically going to have huge implications. We now can see that about 90% of biodiversity is gone when you plant only 4 crops that are genetically engineered and patented. Why is the Amazon being destroyed for GMO soya? The prairies, the Midwest, corn and soya, Roundup-ready corn and soya. And in my country, illegally introduced BT cotton, a GMO cotton with a toxic gene in it, BT's is actually a naturally occurring soil organism. You know, one book I want to write is how everything that's claimed an invention comes from nature. The BT comes from nature. Even this CRISPR and gene editing that's all over the place these days, the new GMOs, that technique CRISPR is how nature works. When a virus attacks a bacteria, the bacteria absorbs part of the virus to protect itself. That's what CRISPR is about. So every bit is either stolen from nature or stolen from indigenous people. I remember I helped the Mexican government because Mexico has an amazing corn. Most of the time, nitrogen fixing takes place in the roots of the plant. But in this particular corn, the leaves themselves fix nitrogen from the atmosphere directly. And this was patented. And the issue is still very, very alive. A yellow bean from Mexico was taken by a trader across the border who then took a patent and said the Mexicans can't trade in the yellow bean. So we could see the implications of monopoly, because a patent is a monopoly. It's a right to have a monopoly and to prevent anyone else from making, selling, distributing. Well, if it's a machine, no one dies if you can't make a machine. If I can't make a mic like this, or can't copy a camera like that, you know, either I pay for a license or I do without it. But in the case of seed, the farmers from whom the seed came are now treated as the criminals because this new intellectual property has been distributed. So since 1987, the seed has been my teacher. The seed has been my guide. And in that little seed, and the seed could be so tiny, you know, look at the mustard seed. It is so tiny. Or millet seed. Millets are called millets because each seed gives you 1 million, according to the Latin million, 100,000. And that's why I love the Spores initiative. Like seed, it multiplies. We have a lovely book in Hindi for children, which I should have brought it for you. It's called The Crazy Seeds. The crazy seeds that love to spread and that can't be stopped. The crazy spores that love to spread. In every seed is all of evolution's past, both nature's contributions and the contributions of our ancestors over 10,000 years. And in it is the potential of the future. Seed is not just a source of life, it's the very foundation of our being. It's been made to look like it's just stuff, and now so much legal work has been done where there's actually a case in America where a farmer called Bauman was sued by Monsanto for saving seed and buying seed from elevators. And the case eventually went to Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court sadly ruled that seed is a self-replicating machine, a machine invented by Monsanto, and a farmer saving it 20 years down the line is stealing the self-replicating machine. And that is violative at 2 levels. Seed is not a machine, it's a self-organized complexity. Because in that tiny seed is all its future evolution, that from that seed becomes a mustard plant, a wheat plant. We save seeds in Navdanya. And for me, it's amazing that each variety, we've saved 4,000 varieties of rice on our farm at Navdanya, and I hope some of you will be able to come. They're flyers of our courses that I asked the Spore team to put out. Each little grain of wheat and of rice seems to look the same, but by the time it's a plant, it's so distinctive. In each seed is the distinctiveness. Its uniqueness, its evolutionary potential, and the combination of both the self-organization and the symbiosis. That is what I've learned over all of these years. For millions of years, seeds evolved freely, and farming communities co-evolved with the seed. They watched which plant has what behavior. And they were breeders, as I said. To take a grass and turn it into 200,000 varieties of rice is ultimate brilliance. And around it, the Mexicans became people of corn, and in India, we became people of rice in the rice areas, people of millets. The seed, of course, is the first link in the food chain. And it's been made so invisible, we don't realize that everything begins in seed. And it is our inherent duty in Navdanya. When we started Navdanya, the pledge that farmers took was a very simple pledge. We have received these seeds from our ancestors and from nature. And we owe it to future generations to hand them over in the richness, the beauty, the diversity, the integrity in which we received it. That's what the Navdanya membership is. That's it, this pledge. And I think we worked with more than 2 million farmers till now. We've set up 150 community seed banks in India and many initiatives on seed across the world. Today, the freedom of the seed, and with it the freedom of culture, is under very severe violent threat, because a few people have just decided we must play God, and we must collect rents from the poorest people. Because an intellectual property royalty is a rent collection. Very much like, when the British came to India, I think within a few decades of the Battle of Plassey, which is 1757, by 1783, they'd already written new laws that the soil and land of India belonged to the British. And therefore, from the peasants of India, they could collect taxes. It was called Lagan. And $45 trillion was transferred from India to England. Some figures say 60 million were left dead. Some figures, 165 million were pushed to famine. But this new idea of being masters of seed and owners of seed has pushed, in my country, 400,000 farmers to suicide. Because rent collection means indebtedness. Indebtedness means you pay, you hemorrhage. And the idea that you can engineer the seed is so wrong, because seeds evolve, seeds adapt. And if the seed is wrong for that particular soil, you're going to have failure. I have witnessed 4, 5, 6 times the seed failing. And at the end of it, the intended farmers take their lives. And to me, it breaks my heart. They go one last time to the agents selling seeds and chemicals and buy a bottle of pesticide. Take it, drink it in the field. And the family is told your husband's body is lying in the farm. And I tried to understand why. Why do they not commit suicide at home? Because that land is Mother Earth. And they thought they were being smart using these new seeds. They are broken when they see the land slip out of their hands. It's that rupture of their bond with Mother Earth and a sense of a failure of the legacy that they received from their ancestors. And that's why, for me, seed saving is about stopping a genocide and an ecocide. We used to have 1,500 varieties of cotton. Now 95% of the cotton is BT cotton. And for those of you who think when you wear a label with organic cotton, they've changed the laws. Only 10% has to be organic to call a cotton shirt organic. That's why we need authentic, honest relationships. And I feel very grateful that because of the suicides of farmers, I started to look for old cotton seeds. We had been looking for seeds of crops. So we started to look for cotton seeds. It took me 4 years to find an ancient cotton variety 4 years. We've now multiplied it. Hundreds and thousands of farmers are now using their own seed, getting out of the debt trap. And we then work with the Gandhi ashrams. You remember Gandhi created the Indian freedom movement by spinning cloth. He said, we are enslaved by the empire of cotton, which takes our indigo, takes our cotton, and dumps industrial clothing on us. We won't be free till we make our own cloth. And so when I realized what the corporations wanted, I went to the spinning wheel. I said, what's the spinning wheel of today? When the industrialization is of life itself. And that's how the seed appeared to me. That the seed is the spinning wheel for freedom. If you have your seeds, you have the highest freedom. Because only real seed multiplies, reproduces, rejuvenates. All the industrial seeds are designed to not renew, to not multiply, and to always be toxic. So every time you're eating food from seed that is not peasant seed and farmer's seeds, you're eating poison one way or the other. A patent on seed is really a theft, but it claims that the original givers of seed are the thieves, intellectual property thieves. And the reason I started Navdanya was I did not accept that more diversity should be pushed to extinction. I did not accept farmers should be locked into seed slavery. I did not accept our ontological conclusion that the poison makers are inventors of life on earth. It was just so wrong at every level. And the word Navdanya came later. I just started to save seeds. And I was going around the country to remote areas where the chemicals hadn't come, where the seeds were still available. And I'm making a trip to South India, to an area where we used to have a bandit called Virappan, who used to kill politicians, kill police. He controlled the illegal sandalwood trade. And I said, that's an area where the seeds will not have been destroyed because no one dared to go. So I went. And I'm going and doing seed collections, and I find this farm, and I stop and count 9 crops together. And then the tribal peasant, the indigenous peasant, came out of his hut, and I said, can we collect some seeds? But you're growing 9 crops. And he looked at me in such disdain. You know, you stupid woman, don't you know? Navdanya. I said, no, I don't know. Because we can do our PhDs, but our cultures only come through initiatives that elders like you keep alive. And he gave me this talk on how the 9 planets, because in India we have 9 planets, with the 2 shadow planets, Rahu and Ketu, the 9 planets in the cosmos, the 9 crops in my field, and the biodiversity of food that my family needs for a healthy diet is one continuum, one harmony. So in the seed is the cosmos. And he said it. He said, when I save seeds, I'm holding the cosmos. And then I started to look. Navdanya was just everywhere. A new year of South India, Ugadi, the women used to collect seeds and then germinate them over 9 days. And then they would take them to the water body. So I started to look more carefully. In that ceremony, in that art, was actually a germination test, a scientific test. The 9 seeds you were germinating told you which seed is good. And if your seed wasn't good of chickpea, you went to your neighbor. If your rice wasn't good, you went to your aunt. And that's why in traditional society, there has never been seed failure. There's never been seed famine. But now you have seed famine everywhere, and such frequent seed failures, and of course, no compensation. The beauty of the entanglement of the seed with the cosmos, for me, is very reassuring. because my doctoral work was on non-locality and non-separability in quantum theory, that you can take a particle and then you split it into two and then millions of light years away, and what happens to one particle is instantly determined for the other particle, not through a signal of electric light, no signal, because the base is one interconnected whole. So non-separation is the reality. Oneness is the reality of the universe. Indigenous cultures have always thought that way. But the new sciences are also teaching us that. And what quantum theory teaches us, biology, which is an honest biology, is also teaching us. Because there's one biology which is not biology. And this non-biology is the assumption that seeds are machines, their parts are genes. You change a part, you've changed the plant. But the real science of biology is teaching us that seed is self-organized. It has evolution built into it. It has intelligence built into it. And when it becomes a plant, that intelligence is what is being articulated. And I think, again, indigenous cultures knew this. But independent science, science that is not influenced by greed and profits and therefore manipulation of how nature works, indigenous science and the emerging sciences are one in recognizing that the earth is living, every being of hers is living. The beautiful ceremony we had was to the living earth, to the sacred living earth, our Mother Earth, and every part of her, including her spatial directions. Because space makes a difference, huge difference. And with the new sciences, we can understand that when you hurt a plant, we had a brilliant physicist, J.C. Bose, who had worked on electricity and electromagnetism, but he applied his physics to understanding plant behavior. And he was convinced that plants are sentient beings. And so if you hurt a plant, if you hit it with a stick, with his electric magnetism, he could understand how the signals change. And let me share this with you. It is so powerful what he said. The tradition of seeing trees and plants as alive has been continued into modern times, but J.C. Bose was the one in our times who started it. And he did detailed expressions to show that the pretension of man and animals for undisputed superiority over their hitherto vegetative brethren does not bear the test of close inspection. These experiments bring the plant much nearer to the human than we ever thought. We find that it is not a mere mass of vegetative growth, but that its every fiber is instinct and sensibility. We are able to record the throbbing of the pulsating life and find these wax and wane according to the life conditions of the plant and cease in the death of the organism. In these and many other ways, the life reactions in plant and humans are the same. And plant intelligence, plant sentience are now coming back. This is what our cultures were based on. In India, touch a plant and it's sacred. You touch the tulsi, you touch the people, you touch the bud. Every plant is sacred because the universe is sacred and part of the divine. And the non-separability that quantum theory teaches us is the non-separability that biology is teaching us and all indigenous cultures had. Interconnectedness is the nature of reality. And I first learned this in outside physics with the movement called Chipko, where women in my region came out to hug trees and said, you cannot cut the trees. You'll have to kill us before you kill the trees. And we managed to stop logging in the high Himalaya. The movement took 10 years. but eventually the recognition that forests are not timber mines, but sources of our soil, our water, our breath. That was recognized in government policy. And we are at the point where our relationship with other beings, with plants, with animals, with microbes, is waiting for a redefinition. As you mentioned, unless we change our perceptions and our worldviews, we will not be able to address the damages of a mechanistic, reductionist, materialistic worldview, that there is no relationship in the world. There's no process in the world. The world is things. But biodiversity is not a thing. Biodiversity is not stuff. It's not a number. Biodiversity is the relationship and flow. You started the foundation, Pantaria. Everything flows. And that's what's missing in the mechanistic worldview. That there's flow that connects us. The flow of energy connects us from the soil to the plants to our gut microbiome. There's new research showing that the more we take care of the soil organisms give nourishment to the plant. And the biodiversity of nourishment in each plant and the diversity of plants feed our gut microbiome of 100 trillion beings that are us. We are only 10% of us, and it is time to shed our human arrogance and move towards a humility of being part of the web of life, being part of an earth family. And the tinier ones, whom we've ignored so much, are actually more powerful, as we saw during the COVID time. The little guys get us at the end. And even, we are near a cemetery. Who's eating the cremated people? The microbes. And as one of our lovely Upanishads says, everything is food, everything is something else's food. And the self-organization with synergy is what I have learned from the seed. They've been my teachers. They've taught me generosity and abundance. They multiply and give more. They've taught me hope. You plant a seed, you might have a cyclone, you plant it again. You might have a flood, you might have a drought. They are the basis of regeneration. And I think sometimes we use the word regeneration in a kind of empty way of extending our arrogant position with respect to the earth. Regeneration means recognizing the earth is alive, all her beings are alive, all her organisms are alive. And regeneration then is a humble co-creation with other beings who are creative, who are there without us. They've been around 99% of the time. We just arrived. We are kids in the evolutionary history. The self-organization as freedom is another thing I have learned from the seed. That freedom is the ability to organize your life and your evolution and your future. And you can't have it without symbiosis. If the bees, the wonderful bees from Yucatan, if the bees were not pollinating the flower to give you the next generation of seed, you wouldn't have future seed. If the mycorrhizal fungi in the soil were not feeding the plant, you wouldn't have the nourishment in the plant. And symbiosis is the way nature works. Cooperation is the way nature works. Mutuality is the way nature works. Nature does not work in competition, in isolation, in atomistic loneliness. We are a community. We are part of the earth community. We are part of human communities. We're part of our particular communities. But every time there's a caring relationship, there's community. And my life's work has been reclaiming the seed as a commons. It is not an invention. It's a flow long before our arrival. And maintaining that flow is our duty. We have an Earth University. It's grown very much like its own seed. And a lot of this we share and learn because now for me it's so clear. As scientists, we are not masters and conquerors and observers. of a dead nature. We are students of a brilliant earth, full of intelligence in ways that we are still figuring out. And I brought two of my recent books for the Spore Library. We'll grow up to be artists too. But this is my movement biography. It's called Terra Viva, My Life in a Biodiversity of Movements. And this is my 40 years of research on agroecology. And I leave this with love and gratitude.